To give us some of that magic that the Solitaire P has, T+A created the Solitaire PSA. Quite a few letters, but this is a pair of planar magnetic headphones priced at $3,900 US, and it is one of my favorite headphones, which really makes this hobby so enjoyable. So let's see what the T+A Solitaire PSA has to offer. Well, every single company has some kind of secret that allows them to create the sound they manage to create. With T+A, the secret is everything. This means that there is no particular element which overweights the others. Every single element is important in creating the final perfect listening solution. Starting with the headphones. T+A Solitaire PSA is one of the most comfortable headphones in the entire world. I don't say those words lightly. I tend to fuss quite a bit about the comfort because lately I just don't feel so comfortable with every single headphone. Some of them are tight, some of them are narrow, and some of them just outright don't work well with human ears. But the Solitaire PSA is fantastic. First off, even if you could purchase the pricier Solitaire P, it would be a good idea to consider the PSA instead. This is because the PSA is mostly made of hard polycarbonate or plastic. It is much lighter than the original P, and that is important because when you purchase yourself a pair of high-end headphones, you want them to be comfortable. Just look at this. I place them on my head and I can barely feel them. It's at the Sennheiser HD 800S level of comfort. It is not just comfortable, it's lightweight. The weight is super evenly distributed across the entire headband. The earpads are super soft, although they are dense in the sponge, and the sponge isn't too much. It's not like they have a very thick amount of sponge which would actually distract you from wearing them. You can barely feel the contact they are making with your ears. This is super nice in actual practice. As I can see on my monitor, I look a bit goofy while wearing them, but the comfort is too much. It's just so nice. The secret to this is that the entire headphone acts in contact with your head. There is no hotspot. There is nothing that overweights the other elements. Everything is in pure, perfect balance. And to get to this result, T+A has some of the tightest engineering in the entire world. It is so nicely done. Everything is done with such a perfect margin. And I've used those headphones so much over the past couple of months. They are my favorite pair of headphones when I want to feel comfortable. And to compete with HiFiMan's unveiled solution, this is the Susvara Unveiled, and HiFiMan came with an interesting solution to uncover the drivers completely. The next best thing that T+A could have done is provide some of the most acoustically transparent ear cup possible, to the point where it is just a metallic grill. It shouldn't have any kind of reflective ability on the sound. And you can actually hear this. When you place the Solitaire PSA on your head, you can barely hear that they isolate. They basically don't isolate at all. And they actually leak really loud. It's like you are having speakers here. Everything that goes from the back of the driver, it goes out. It doesn't really get reflected back into your ears, which is one of the most surprising approaches, because you'll have to take the acoustics of your rooms into account, even if just a slightly bit, because the sound will eventually bounce on the walls of your room and then back into your ears. But it doesn't really bounce from the driver to the ear cup and then back into your ear. The red foam on the inside also has an acoustic roll. The headphone feels really well made. There is no creaking noise, as you can see. Every single handling bit is absolutely perfect. Just listen to this. If I moved them anymore, I fear that I may break them. This is how much I'm pushing them, but still no creaking, no noise, everything just assembles so perfectly. There is a selection of cables when you purchase the T+A Solitaire PSA, and this is the longer cable, and all of them are quite long. You get a 4.4mm balanced cable. I love this. I'm absolutely in love with the entire package, but an interesting part is that you can't really use aftermarket cables with them, because although it is the 3.5mm cable, it has this super long plug. So if you were to try to use a different cable, it will have to have this length for the plug, because otherwise you can't really push it. The headphone cable connector is really deep inside, so you have to do this. As you can see, the click is super satisfying. This has one of the best build qualities that I've ever touched in my entire life, and I'm just delighted with this. So there are a collection of cables that you can order them with. Typically you order them with 2 cables and you get a selection of those 2 cables. The 4.4mm balanced cable works really well for me. especially as I have a good collection of amplifiers. And we get to the amplifier part. To drive the Solitaire PSA, you need quite a bit of power. It is one of the hardest to drive headphones in the entire world. Not quite as hard as the Susvara Unveiled, so it's slightly easier to drive, but still it's not manageable for most portable amplifiers, and even for some desktop amplifiers it will pose quite a threat. Actually, one of my favorite combos to drive the Solitaire PSA has been a portable one, the iBasso D16 plus iBasso PB5. The combo works beautifully, but is not really portable. It's a huge stack of tube amplifier and a transportable desktop DAC. Of course, this entire review wouldn't really matter if it weren't for the sound. So how does the Solitaire PSA sound like? Well, first off, the sound of the Solitaire PSA is, in one word, wide. Is the widest, most airy sound that I've heard in a headphone. The bass is on the more neutral side, so you have to change the battery. You can expect a slightly lower amount of bass than, for example, with Dan Clark Expanse, because the Expanse has a more voracious bass with more impact and more power to the bass, while the Solitaire PSA tends to have a more neutral bass with a bit more air, also a more expanded soundstage. The biggest strength of the PSA is the soundstage. It's like the widest sounding headphone in the entire world. It just creates space, air, and it projects each instrument laterally and vertically and in depth so well. It's the best headphone for soundstage. At this point, I should say it is the widest sounding that I've heard. Nothing doesn't get quite as wide, not even the mighty Sennheiser HD 800S. In fact, compared to it, the 800S just sounds bright and sharp. It doesn't sound as natural in the mid-range because the PSA is one of the most natural sounding headphones out there. It doesn't just manage a wide and airy sound, it manages to be controlled. It manages to sound natural. Both male and female voices just sound super natural and super clean, refined and detailed. While the treble is on the brighter side, it's not fatiguing, it is not forcefully bright, it's just where it should be. In music where you have cymbals, you will hear those cymbals, you'll hear brightness, air and sparkle, you'll hear the high-end extension. And this is something that the PSA does really beautifully. It tends to emphasize the open character of each song. It tends to create this super holographic, super expanded sound that travels in every single direction. It's the most holographic sounding headphone ever, and this is one of the very rare instances where a headphone can actually have a sound that is so unique, yet in a good way, that I actually spend time with it, listening to my entire music, just listening. I couldn't even focus on finishing the written review or on filming the video review before actually listening to the PSA. This is how unique the signature is. It just presents space and instrument separation in a way that you've never heard before. It's the bass that is neutral. The neutral bass won't be for everyone, for sure, because a neutral bass tends to be neutral. Most people prefer a bit more bass, but to have this airy character, I think it's necessary to have a controlled bass, because otherwise you can't really have air plus bass. No headphone ever did that. But what the Solitaire PSA does is create the widest. It creates the most spacious sound that you can ever expect to hear. Because you have so much space between instruments and so much space in which each instrument is playing, you get a different way of presenting the resolution. It's not like you have details, but every single detail is amplified. It's expanded. You get so much space to hear every single detail. And it's actually quite unique because most headphones just cramp together the whole instrument selection and they don't have the space to develop this level of resolution and detail. And Solitaire PSA presents details which I have never heard with other headphones. They don't really bring forward the background layer of instruments, but they tend to present it super well defined, like it's an entire different distance from the foreground layer of instruments. So because of this presentation, you just hear much more detail, and yet it's not fatiguing. It's not like it's dry or analytical or a studio type of detail. It's a pleasing fun sounding type of detail. It's actually a really good presentation in every single way I can imagine. For most people, I think that the Solitaire PSA would be the final endgame headphone if you want a neutralish, wide and expanded sound. If you wanted something different, for example, if you wanted a bass head headphone to be your final destination, probably Solitaire PSA won't deliver the bass head level of bass. Even Dan Clark Expanse has more bass and it has a more punchy sound, because the Solitaire PSA doesn't present punch as much as it presents space. It presents this atmospheric type of presentation. It's the atmosphere which is evident, which is revealed to you. Each song has its own unique feeling to it. It's more about how it makes you feel than what you hear instantly. And it's fun, it's super fun. I totally recommend you giving them a listen. I have made the full written review if you want to read my feelings, because now I got a bit too excited to actually properly digest and study the sound. But I do think that you are having fun nonetheless. I thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've learned something, and if you have questions, please write them in the comments. I should be able to help a bit more in writing. I feel super enthusiastic when talking about something that made me rediscover my entire music collection. It's not often that a headphone can do that, and when it does, we should celebrate it by being a bit more enthusiastic. Even if you didn't consider the entire context, Solitaire PSA is a favorite of mine that I like on a personal level. It's a headphone which I find more than interesting. It's insightful. It gives you an insight into your own collection, which no other headphone does, because it has a unique tone. I wouldn't say it is colored, because the mid-range is super natural, like it's so flat natural, you just don't hear any kind of coloration. What you hear is your music exposed and rendered in a new way, and I liked that quite a lot. I dig the sound. I think that you will like it, especially if you tend to go for this type of neutralish sound with a wide and holographic soundstage. If you give them proper power, if you have a good source, they will have quite a lot of bass, but you need a good source. That's also important with the Solitaire PSA. Another important thing is to keep having fun, enjoy what you already have, but always be open-minded to explore something better. Thank you so much for watching, and if you could explore that subscribe button to enjoy more videos from me, if you could like this video, if you liked it, I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope we'll see each other this soon. Bye bye!